What's up, guys? Illegal Defense, episode 13. We're going to get straight into it with some college football. Great games last week, rivalry week. We're going to get straight into the big game, Ohio State versus Michigan. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, huge week, like you said, and huge game. I mean, look, this had a lot of hype going into it. Number two versus number three for the game. Best rivalry in college football, probably best rivalry in college sports overall, and maybe in all of sports. Period.
For sure.
And yeah, like I said, a lot of hype going into it. The buildup was crazy. Everybody was tuned in. Both teams knew you win this game, you're pretty
Race
much in
to
the
win.
playoffs. So a lot on the line too in a rivalry that was pretty one sided for the last
Decade.
2 decades really. Michigan obviously won last year. We know the whole snow happening and Ohio State being called soft for that game and all that. Um, but yeah, people, me included, I thought Ohio State was, gonna treat this kind of like how they treated Clemson back a few years ago, and go and have a revenge game, really put it on Michigan. Just didn't happen.
No.
Almost, it was a funny game because almost everything that should have worked for Ohio State kind of didn't in some respects. I mean, they kind of dominated that first half, but they just, let Michigan just fly down the field on a few explosive chunk plays, score touchdowns, kept the game close going into the half. You come out of the half and just more of the same happened. They kept leaving those receivers on the outside, single coverage. They kept sending all out blitzes at the quarterback, and Michigan's quarterback JJ McCarthy was able to find the open man down the field time after time and hit him over the top for huge plays. Guys were getting beat on double moves and no safety over the top to come help with those plays. And yeah, just all around, it just kind of all fell apart for Ohio State. They couldn't really keep the offense going. Like all the momentum kind of shifted to Michigan.
Yeah.
We had the headbutt by the one of the tight ends, G. Scott Jr. knocks Ohio State from pretty
Yeah.
much around the midfield mark, where they would have started the drive in great field position, and and they end up in first and 35.
Yeah, that was just such a setback.
Yeah, and they just couldn't get anything going from there. It was really deep hole for them to climb out of. And then, the game was closer than the score would tell you.
Yeah, for sure.
Michigan just completely ran away with it in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter, just hit, another two extra huge explosive touchdown plays at the end, just to kind of pile it on. But yeah, I mean, look, great win for Michigan. Harbaugh really, displayed his coaching abilities in this game. Completely outcoached Ryan Day. Look, Michigan is a good program. They've clearly risen to be, one of the elite programs of the Big Ten. I mean, they always were kind of the next best outside of Ohio State. It seems like if they're not there, they're right around the talent level that Ohio State is at. They still don't have the recruiting advantage, I
Right.
would say, but they have a guy now, JJ McCarthy. He's a 5-star quarterback, and he's gonna be playing there. They're gonna see him. They're gonna see him. Plenty more times, and yeah, he look. Ohio State's got to make some changes and do some things to get back at Michigan and really kind of change the way they approach things.
Yeah.
I seen a lot on the internet, people talking about how these kind of things wouldn't happen if this was Jim Tressel or Urban Meyer. I agree with them to an extent, because like for John Harbaugh, right? You saw that he came into this game prepared with plays for Ohio State, right?
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
this game is known for being such a fierce rivalry that these guys, both teams, they set things up from the summer in training camp for
Hmm.
this game. It's that important. It's that much is on the line in this game. The Michigan Wolverines, they had that. They did a bunch of things that they didn't do all year, waiting for to play Ohio State to surprise
To
them.
put
The
them.
jump pass
Yeah.
that they hit on the huge fourth down play. Ohio State, they didn't really have those kind of things happening, right?
Right.
Former alumni and players were pretty disappointed with the outcome.
Yeah.
A lot of them were disappointed, but at the end of the day, it is a lot being made out of maybe nothing at this point. You know, Jim Tressel, Urban Meyer, they always, for the most part, beat Michigan. I don't think they face the same caliber of Michigan that
That Ryan Day is
yeah, that
facing.
we're seeing right now. Also, there was a different level of control you could have as a head coach back then. Now with the transfer portal, you gotta be careful with how you
How you dictate
how you
things, how
treat
you go about
players. Yeah,
things. Yeah.
how you do things. Urban Meyer. I mean, we know from his time with the Jags and all that stuff that comes out, he rules with an iron fist.
Yeah.
Great coach, but he rules with an iron fist, and it doesn't really work for the NFL guys, and it probably wouldn't work that great unless he made some changes now in the whole NIL era, where people are going to be like, "Look, he's a good coach. He's putting me in position to win, but I don't need to deal with this guy yelling at me or benching me because this or that. I'll just
Right.
go play somewhere else and have a good time." So it takes now
It's a
certain
whole
kind of
different,
people
yeah,
to,
it's
to
a whole
deal with
different
that.
landscape.
It would work at maybe a not so good program where it's not a bunch of 5 stars that everyone in the country wants. It's a little different in Ohio State. That being said, no excuses. You got to get the job done. You bring in Jim Knowles to shore up the defense. The defense pretty much collapsed. I mean,
Yeah.
they played good in the first half and they only let off like I think it was 2 or 3 big plays, but second half they kept making the same mistakes, kept getting cooked
In the
secondary.
and they let up on the run. I think that was part of the. I think one good takeaway as a Buckeye fan and just like any Ohio State fan can take away from this is that you can come away with this game with the thing is like Ohio State kind of beat themselves in a sense. And I mean, hats off to Michigan. They played a great game. They game planned. You can tell that Hallbrook coached and he had his guys prepared. But I mean, from the penalties, from headbutt, it's like why are you headbutting somebody when you're already third and long, and then you just set, or second and long, and then you just set your team back a whole nother 15 yards. Um, and then on top of that, it's like Jim Knowles, there was very little adjustments. Ryan Day was being very conservative. I mean, I think he trusted his defense. I think that's what it really came down to, and their defense just wasn't able to perform to the degree that they normally do, or to where they are supposed to. But again, I mean, Michigan, they played well. They did what they had to do. I think they were way more prepared. I think they valued this game a lot more than Ohio State, which is kind of weird because you would think Ohio State did a little bit more considering that they lost last year, and then on top of that, it's like I mean it's Michigan, so I mean
Yeah.
it's a weird situation, but
A few things. So I think on one end, yes, Ohio State did kind of beat themselves, and you kind of see this sometimes, especially at the college level. You could be a great team, but will that great team show up and have that A plus, A minus game, even a B plus game every week? This for Ohio State was kind of like a C minus type of game that they put out there. It
no.
wasn't one of their best games that they put out there, and as a result, they got beat. On top of, like you said, not making adjustments. I think what the only thing that I can make heads or tails of and try to come to terms with for why JJ McCarthy was able to keep beating them with the deep ball all game was they kept saying he got lucky. He can't do that again. He got lucky again. He can't do that again. Oh man, what kind of luck is this? They just keep beating us over the top for
Yeah.
beating us in single coverage. How many times is this going to happen? What are the chances? Okay, at this point, it's clear he has that ability. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they never
It's something
shifted
you
it.
have to respect at
Right.
this point.
The other point that I would make is to your point about Michigan feeling like they wanted this game more. I think this is sometimes the unforeseen consequences of success, where for the last 2 decades, Ohio State's pretty much,
Ran the
destroyed Michigan every time, right? So now, if you're Michigan, you don't forget that. You never like getting beat by Ohio State, but you might have not had the ability all those years. They might have tried just as hard, but the talent gap might have been just too wide.
Right.
Now the talent gap isn't as huge, and the coaching is there to back it up. And they're coming into this game thinking about Ohio State all year, where Ohio State is thinking national championship all year,
right?
and they're looking a little past this. They probably looked at last year like, oh, they got lucky. It was snowing, and our offense wasn't really built perfectly for that. And don't worry, we'll get them this year. We'll handle them. Our defense is better now too, and CJ Stroud has another year, and we have other receivers stepping up. But Michigan planned and they handled the business and they did what they needed to do. So we'll talk about more at a later point, the playoff implications of all this and all that. But yeah, certainly a fun weekend. Disappointing for Ohio State. I mean, even recruits in almost a funny way talked about how the city of Columbus really like felt grim and like hurting the whole city, as like you could tell that they really care about this team and about football. So even in a loss, that's something that recruits used as somewhat as a positive, even just being that, okay, this place, they care about football. It's not like, oh, this is just another game and we'll get them next year. No, people were calling for Ryan's Day's head at this point.
Yeah,
that's how extreme things were getting.
Which is I think it's kind of unfair. I mean, the guys won against Michigan, so. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later in the episode. The next game that we're going to get into, another big matchup that we spoke about last week, was the USC versus Notre Dame matchup. We saw Caleb Williams light it up. He had such a great game. I think kind of separated himself in the Heisman talks. But what was your thoughts on that game and just how that kind of played out?
Yeah, I mean, USC really just took it to Notre Dame. They knew they had to win this game to keep alive for the playoff, keep their chances alive. Against a Notre Dame team that we know would, if they were to win, it's going to be by defense, ball control, running the ball, time of possession, that type of thing, being more physical than USC. I mean, USC kind of was the more physical team in this game. Caleb Williams puts up another great performance, like you said. Kind of cementing his spot. I mean, I don't know. I don't really think there's another player to be considered in the Heisman right now. I mean, CJ Stroud was kind of there all year. There kind of wasn't much else. I mean, Caleb Williams was like the only other guy really. Yeah. And with this loss, you can't lose at home to your rival by, X amount of points like this and then be considered for the Heisman. So that's out the window for CJ Stroud. I don't see any other takers, any other challengers really for Caleb Williams, so he probably locked that up regardless what happens from here on out. And but yeah, look, good performance for USC. Lincoln Riley, a lot of people have strong opinions on him one way or the other, whether they think he's a great coach, whether they think he's a snake, whatever. Look, he's proven he's a great coach. I mean, how many other coaches can do this at whatever program they have? Yeah, 1 year, a few kids in the transfer portal, and your offense is flying, and you're have a chance to make the playoffs. I mean, they're in control of their own destiny going forward. So yeah, impressive win for USC. Probably one of the more dangerous teams out there too. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks, oh yeah, I'd like to face this team. I think we could get one over on them. I mean, look, their defense isn't that good, but they're gonna put up points, and all they need to do is just enough to score one more point than you. So I don't think they could be discounted from any games at this point. And yeah, for Notre Dame, I mean, solid fighting, not good enough. They rose in the rankings a little bit late with a few wins, but at the end of the day, nobody's really thinking that Notre Dame was a world beat or anything like that. But solid effort for them. They'll be able to build on it. I think, looking ahead to next year, Marcus Freeman with a year of experience under his belt, they could potentially be a dangerous team next year. And they'll be able to kind of build on this game and look back on this as a stepping stone to continue to improve.
For sure. I think, and just like you said with Marcus Freeman, I think it'll be great to see what he could do next year. We kind of get more of a full resume of what he's capable of doing, and Obviously, I mean, he's a young, talented coach. I don't think he'll have any problem recruiting. He's very charismatic, has great character. So I think Notre Dame is on the rise, and I think they'll be fine. I think they do have a little bit of changes they have to put. I mean, the offense most likely they'll have to make a change. Maybe he'll be able to pick out his own coordinator rather than having to stick with their actual offensive coordinator they have now. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see the outcome of Notre Dame and what they do moving forward. So with our next game, we're gonna get into the Clemson versus South Carolina game. Clemson fell short, 30-31 to South Carolina. Spencer Rattler showed up once again, and he gave it to him. He gave it to Clemson, and I mean, we talked about how Clemson has kind of underperformed this year, and I mean, South Carolina just jumped on them and took advantage of that. So
Yeah, watching South Carolina dismantle Tennessee last week, it felt like this was coming, but it almost felt like, I
it's too good
I
to
looked
be
at it
true.
like, nah, that won't happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But when you look at it right in hindsight, I mean, how could you not see this coming? And like I said, even like me, I thought Clemson was going to win that game, but you just kind of lean on the past, right? Clemson, I mean, look, this is one of the first times Clemson has lost at home in, a few seasons now.
yeah,
So, to think that one, South Carolina was going to do that to Tennessee, and then they were going to catch Clemson at home the very next week when, Clemson, like, look, they've struggled, but they've played good enough at games. And, but yeah, I mean, look, this was just not a good look for Clemson. Their offense really struggled defensively. They had some big plays, but obviously, you let South Carolina put up 31 on you. Not saying as much as about the defense there.
right.
And Clemson was ahead in this game. I mean, when I checked the score, I didn't watch the game initially. I checked the score the first time, and Clemson was ahead by like 14 points or something like that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I believe it's like 14-0 when I saw it. And then next thing you know, South Carolina's climbing back in the game. And then the next thing you know, South Carolina comes away with the win. So, yeah, I mean, look, disappointing if you're Clemson, but I think if you're a Clemson fan, you kind of saw this coming. I mean,
Yeah,
all year you kind of struggled
yeah. I
with
don't think
things.
anybody's been
Yeah,
really too high on them.
The ACC as a whole hasn't been very good. So, and you've struggled with the teams there. Losing to your rival at home, I mean, that's rough. But I mean, this was the year for a team like South Carolina to do it when, Clemson has a decent record still, and I don't think there should be any panic about getting rid of Dabo or anything yet.
Yeah, I don't think so at all.
Especially, you know, their program before Dabble versus after. I mean, now, bad
It's
season.
completely different.
Yeah, bad season is losing 2 games before the conference championship. I mean, he definitely raised the standards there. But yeah, nonetheless, good win for South Carolina. Clemson, you kind of figured it wasn't going to be their year. They had a chance to make the playoffs, but we talked about it before. If they made the playoffs, probably they're getting run out in the first game anyway. So whatever. Back to the drawing board for Dabo. He'll have a new team next year. A lot of these guys leaving. Who knows what will happen with their quarterback, with DJ, if he's going to stay there and continue to be the starter, or if they're going to turn the keys over to the
Cade
young
Klubnik.
to the young gun, Cade Klubnik. And yeah, we'll see what kind of changes Dabo needs to make. He obviously needs to make some changes there. He wanted to promote from within. Maybe he'll kind of expand his search and look for some outside help going forward.
All right, so that pretty much sums it up for our recap for the week. We're gonna get into the some of the topics, and we went over it a little bit with Ohio State and the Michigan game, but we're gonna go into the current playoff picture and kind of the overview of how things kind of shape out. I mean, right now, one is Georgia, two is obviously Michigan, three is I believe TCU, and four we have USC, but we have a lot of games to be played still, and the final decision won't be made until Sunday. So, how do you see this all panning out? Even in Ohio State playing at number five, Is there a way they could sneak in, or what? How do you see everything kind of panning out, and what's your predictions on how this playoffs picture ends up being in general?
Yeah, so you have Georgia taking on LSU as in the SEC championship. They're in whether they win or lose that game, unless they get like steamrolled by LSU. Maybe they're probably in no matter what. They're like a 16.5 point favorite in this game. They probably take care of business and handle it, even if they don't cover the spread. Um, so yeah, that's number one, Georgia. Number two, Michigan. Similar situation. They play a Purdue team, and they're probably in unless they get steamrolled as well. So those two are kind of locked in. The worst that could happen is maybe they drop, positions and out of the 1 or 2 seeds for them. But then it gets interesting with number 3 TCU taking on Kansas State for the Big 12 championship. Kansas State is a team they've beaten before, but Kansas State is a good team in a competitive Big 12, and it's TCU is only favored by 2.5 points in this game. So obviously Vegas expects this to be a close one. TCU definitely has a chance of not pulling this win off. Depending on how that goes, TCU might fall out of playoff contention if they lose, especially if they lose and take a bad loss. Some people say, oh, if it's by a touchdown, then maybe they stay in. If it's by 2 touchdowns, maybe they stay in. We don't know the numbers, and I don't want to try to guess what the committee is going to do with that. It's, who knows? But either way, we know that TCU is far from guaranteed that spot.
No.
They might lose by 3 and not make it. So if you're TCU, you win the game and you're in. And that's, outside of that, you don't want to leave that into the playoff committee's hands and see how they deal with things. Number 4, USC taking on Utah. Utah, solid team. Utah is the only team that beat USC this year.
Mhm.
And, Utah beat them at home. Utah was at home in that game. And now they're going to play neutral site game. Utah is a solid team, well-coached team, built all around offense and defense. They could do it both. And yeah, this one is another tight spread, 2.5 point spread again. USC is the favorite. I think there's a pretty good chance Utah could take this game. And look, if you're USC, it's kind of the same thing as TCU, but even worse, really. TCU's in a better position than you because they have no losses. USC, if they lose this game, they're out. It doesn't matter if they lose by 1, they're out. So if you're USC, you need to take care of business. If you're one of the other teams outside of the top 4, in the 5-6 range, you're hoping for Utah to win this game and maybe your team gets in. So a lot of people around the country will be rooting for Utah at this point, just to see some chaos and probably rooting for Kansas State as well. And then we can now talk about those teams sitting just outside of the top 4 of that to make the cut, and that's Ohio State, which we talked about, sitting there at number 5, and number 6, Alabama. The committee ranked Ohio State number 5, which was huge because that means they would be the next team in. There's no games that they're playing or Alabama is playing in the meantime, so whoever was ranked number 5 in this case gets the nod for any team losing. Yeah, and there was a lot of discussion who should be the 5 seed right now or ranked number 5. No seed because you wouldn't be in anything. But yeah, I mean, look, Ohio State lost to Michigan, won every other game by double digits. I think it was pretty clear that they should have the nod over Bama. They have better wins than Bama. Bama has 2 losses. I know people say, yeah, they lost, 2 losses by combined 4 points and all that, but they don't have any quality wins, and they still have 2 losses, right? You win the game, right? If Ohio State wins the Michigan game, it doesn't matter how they won it. They're then they would be going no problem, right? So I didn't see why there was such a discussion about that. So even Ohio State's fans talking about how they don't deserve the playoffs after that game, but that's all emotional stuff. They don't like losing to Michigan. The tune changed fairly quickly over the next few days after that when they start realizing, oh, well, if the team loses, we should have a shot, And I think the narrative around it is that Ohio State doesn't deserve to make the playoffs for losing to Michigan. But if one of those 4 one of those two other teams loses,
Loses.
then Ohio State does deserve it more than the rest of the people who are left,
Right.
right? So that's kind of how that stands. I would say between those two games that with TCU and USC, both of those teams, there's probably about a 60% chance that one of them loses. If you only need one of them to lose for Ohio State to get in, you need two to lose if you are a Bama fan. That's highly unlikely, but look, we've seen crazier things happen before. And on the other flip side, if both of them win, then they stay in, and the top four stays the same, and that's our playoff teams. So we're getting really, really right down to it. Everything will be set in stone after those games, like you mentioned, and either way, it should be a fun playoff with Georgia, Michigan, and whoever else makes it. I will say USC is probably one of the more dangerous teams here.
Yeah.
But as a whole, probably any of those, I mean, really more than the top six. I mean, there's probably 10 teams that could win this national championship.
Yeah.
You just need to get in this. You just need to get
into the playoffs
and then play your best football at the right time. I mean, Tennessee, who's sitting at number 7, they're not going to get a chance to get in no matter what. Almost no matter what. I mean, maybe if LSU dominates Georgia and they knock them out, and then TCU gets dominated, and then USC loses, then now you're bringing in a third team on top of Ohio State, Bama. But look, Tennessee could probably win the whole thing. Penn State played Ohio State very close.
Very well.
They're a solid team. I mean, they got destroyed by Michigan, but look, they didn't play their best football that game either. If they play their best football, I'm sure they could probably win the whole thing as well. So there's probably like 10 teams at this point in college football that can do that. But yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see who gets in. Either way, we should be in for a fun postseason, and then obviously all the other teams will fall into place where which bowl games, and we'll see how all that works.
Yeah. So with that being said, I'm sure everybody's going to be tuned in. A lot of fans in the whole country going to be watching these games, whether it's Ohio State fans, Bama fans, whatever the case is. But we're going to get into the actually Ohio State's conference, so to speak, the Big Ten conference, and all the upgrades at coaches that were hired. I mean, from Matt Rule to Luke Fickell, just the current status of how the Big Ten is kind of shaping out to be, and seems like it's going for the better rather than just having 2 or 3 teams that are kind of dominant throughout the entire year. So it's good to see these changes. Good to see people that can turn around programs. I mean, we've seen what Fickell did in Cincinnati. What Matt Rule has done. I mean, obviously he's coming from the Panthers, and that didn't quite work out the same way it did in college. But outside of that, I think everybody can agree that he's great at changing programs. So I mean, what's your thoughts on all the changes in the Big Ten?
Yeah, great hires, solid hires, home run hires. Really, if you think of who's available and the type of programs they are, and the type of leaders and coaches that they got to take them over. The Big Ten has always been kind of in this somewhat of a competition with the SEC. I mean, the SEC is kind of known as the best conference in college football. The Big Ten has been a somewhat of a close second. If you talk to an SEC fan, they think they're far and away the best conference, but realistically, the Big Ten is a lot closer than all the other conferences.
Right.
We saw the shift in the SEC over the past few years, getting kind of these stacked programs with great head coaches, and it being just a lion's den of a season, trying to go against all these other guys. And we saw what that's done. It's been catching up, and it's one of the reasons why, the SEC is where it's at right now. Kirby Smart has really changed around that Georgia program, brought them to the forefront, brought them to prominence. We see the changes in Tennessee. It's a program that has been historically bad for the past 2 decades or so. Completely get turned around between last year and this year. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss is another one. We see what's happening in South Carolina with Shane Beamer. Arkansas, Sam Pittman. It goes on and on. Solid coaches. The Big Ten is kind of getting their little own version of this now. We see, obviously, the Ohio State program is always going to have a solid coach with their tradition. Ryan Day despite that loss, is one of the best coaches in college football. Jim Harbaugh is really proving himself. Look, we know he's a good head coach. We saw what he did with the 49ers, taking the team to the Super Bowl. You don't do that as a okay head coach,
yeah,
especially without a, it's not like he had some superstar quarterback carrying his team, or, like somebody could say about, say an NBA with LeBron. Oh, you had LeBron to win it,
Yeah,
or
so
if you had Brady to win it. No, he's winning it with his
Colin
team.
Kaepernick and Alex Smith.
Yeah,
so.
and coaching his way to victory. So he's certainly proven, and with the past two iterations of the game this year and last year, coming away with wins, even more proving himself. But now you keep a guy like James Franklin. He's there at Penn State. His only two losses were to Ohio State and Michigan. They've been playing solid. They have a super young team. They're going to be stacked next year. Solid team next year. Mel Tucker, bad year at Michigan State this year. But can't forget what he did last year. With a few guys in the transfer portal, he took his team to a very, very solid, respectable win total, and really got the job done. Now you bring in a coach like Luke Fickell in a place like Wisconsin. Like you talked about, Cincinnati really brought them to prominence. I mean, to get a team like that into the college football playoff says a lot. Not to mention they had the second most amount of players drafted that year, right? So to do that at a place like Cincinnati, you go to the Big Ten, to a program like Wisconsin, he's going to do very well there, right? Yeah. Very, very well there. So he's going to, certainly be a headache for these other coaches in the Big Ten. You talked about Matt Rule. We saw what he did at Baylor right after the whole controversy and scandal over there. Completely rebuilt that program. He didn't do as good of a job in the NFL, but the NFL is tough, man. You got to get guys to buy in. College is certainly what he knows how to do best. He's definitely a program rebuilder, right. And he's going to be able to rebuild a program like Nebraska, who has a huge rabid fan base. It's very overlooked these days because Nebraska hasn't been good, but man, if he could start having some success there, it's gonna really light that place up.
Yeah.
And I expect him to do a lot better than Scott Frost did. So
yeah, and it'll be good for Luke Fickell. I mean, he's coming back to the Big Ten. We known that he coached Ohio State. I think it was substantial that he was able to get Cincinnati into the playoffs last year. To sustain that level of play and to sustain that in Cincinnati, I think is kind of tough. Although I did think he did a good job this year. But I think it's like with him, with his hire specifically, I think it's like he got out at the right time, because you don't want to be one of those coaches where it's like you set that standard the year before and it's like, okay, we can make the playoffs, but at the same time, it's like, that's not the reality of it. The reality is you're not gonna have a bunch of 5-star recruits come into Cincy, and you're gonna be able to compete with all these other teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's a hard way to build. And look, they were moving to the Big 12 next year,
right?
But huge loss for the Big 12. You had a guy like Luke Fickell, would have been great to have in the Big 12. Really help that conference as a whole, bring some more notoriety, being a really great head coach. Now goes off to the Big Ten, which, by the way, the feeling around that hire is, one, it's a good hire because obviously Luke Fickell's a good coach. Two, he knows the Big Ten, having spent time at Ohio State coaching, but he might be putting himself in perfect position to be the next Ohio State head coach at some point down the line. Now, whether that be, maybe things don't go well for Ryan Day, maybe Ryan Day is just there for a few more years and then he ends up going off to the NFL or something like that. But Luke Fickell has already publicly acknowledged that that would be a job that he covets and that he would take. So, I mean, being at Wisconsin is a perfect place to to be a head coach in the Big Ten. You already know how to recruit the area, being in Wisconsin, right? And already having ties to Ohio State. He does well there. If Ryan Day does great and he never wants to leave, then he could probably stay there as long as he wants if he maintains the level of success that Ohio State expects. But if not, Luke Fickle's right there. And as soon as things went bad this past week, the first thing people said was, "Why don't we go hire Luke Fickle?"
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, he pops up with Wisconsin. So
Wisconsin job, man.
yeah, certainly interesting thing to watch. But yeah, look, Big Ten as a whole, it looks great getting all these coaches and look, that's what the TV money deal does. Like they have that huge TV deal. Teams have the money. Go get the good coaches. Go get the best of the best. Bring them to the Big Ten. That's going to bring you the better players, and that's going to have you compete in a level where you can be in the upper echelon with the SEC, and perhaps there's a chance they could surpass them if everything goes right. We know Nick Saban is kind of towards the tail end of his career. Obviously, you have Kirby Smart over there and the other programs, but look, you have USC coming to the Big Ten with Lincoln Riley. Who knows what happens with Chip Kelly? But if he comes over with UCLA, all of a sudden, it's game. Wow, a lot of great coaches in the Big Ten. So things change pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think as time goes on with the college football expansion, it'll make things a lot more interesting. Considering the fact that obviously conference championships are gonna mean something, but outside of that, it's like there's so many great teams in the Big Ten. It'll be interesting to see who's able to get into the playoffs, who's able not to get into the playoffs. And obviously it'll just be great. I think it's a lot of it's trending upward for the Big Ten, and it's great to see considering the college football landscape. So we're gonna get into our weekly preview for college football, and obviously we've talked a little bit about these games. But we're gonna get into the Utah versus USC matchup. USC is currently the favorite, I believe, by -3. And they are obviously playing Utah, the only loss that they have this year. It's tough to beat a team twice. So that's one thing that Utah is going to have to do again, go in and beat USC, especially I think USC isn't the same team that they versed in the beginning of the season. But USC also has to be aware of Utah as well. Utah has also gotten better as time went on. But I think it'll be an interesting matchup. USC, I think, again, it's tough. It's tough. It's really tough. It's a tough call, but I think Utah, again, it's tough to beat the same team twice, especially when they're playing at such a high level. I think USC takes care of business and runs away with this.
Yeah, USC is certainly hot right now, stringing together great wins, very solid performances from Caleb Williams. Team seems like they're just gelling and really hitting on all cylinders. Like you said, though, Utah is a good team, and it is hard to beat a team twice. What we do know is Utah dismantled Oregon twice last year, and Oregon was supposed to be the better team to everyone, and they went in, destroyed them in the regular season. Oregon wanted the matchup with Utah again in the conference championship, and Utah stomped all over them and shut them, put them to bed pretty much. So, man, obviously they played already and it was a close game, right? So it's not the same exact type of situation, but Utah does know what it takes to beat a team twice in a year. That being said, it will be a challenge. That will not be an easy accomplishment to do. Lincoln Riley has his guys playing great. Their defense is not so great, but look, when you could score so many points, you only need a few stops a game to solidify the win here. So, look, to me, this is the most interesting matchup of the week. I think both of these teams are very solid. Utah being ranked at number 14. I wouldn't say they don't deserve it. They have 3 losses, right? They lost to Florida, Oregon, and then UCLA, all on the road. But all solid really teams in their own right, especially, the other 2 Pac-12 teams. Florida showed up and down, but they played them in the beginning of the year when Anthony Richardson was going off and looked like he might be a Heisman contender. So, if it wasn't for that, I would think Utah is probably talent wise and coaching wise probably a top 10 team. It'll be a battle, and definitely the matchup I'm looking forward to most on this conference championship week.
The next conference championship, we have the TCU ranked number 4 TCU. They're versing Kansas State, and I think this is a really interesting game. I think TCU, everybody's been kind of like expecting them to lose, expecting them to kind of fall. And K State, I mean, K State's a great team. I think they're able to beat TCU, and I think if anything kind of shakes up the college football playoff picture, I think this is the game where I think TCU just runs out of gas, and I think K State takes advantage of that and can capitalize on that and kind of ruin how their season pans out. So
Yeah, I mean, look, Kansas State, solid team, great offensive firepower. I have a guy in Adrian Martinez that transfers in, plays his best football of his college career over there. When you have a weapon like Deuce Vaughn in the backfield that can run the ball all over the place and be a really good weapon out of the backfield as well. Look, they have a chance to pull this upset. Vegas thinks this is a close game, 2.5-point spread. So obviously Vegas knows that, yeah, Kansas State is certainly not to be overlooked. TCU, this it's hard to go lean either way with this game. I kind of feel similar to how I felt about Clemson last week going into this past week, where Clemson had that matchup with South Carolina. It's like, it seems inevitable, but yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen. And right now, I'm not saying that TCU is going to get the job done the way South Carolina did, or Kansas State is going to get the job done like South Carolina did, but I get that kind of a feeling here just because TCU found a lot of ways to win some of these games close. At some point, the luck feels like it could run out. I mean, even their head coach, Sonny Dykes, has talked about this. Yeah, I mean, their luck just seems like it's going to run out at some point, and this might be the week it bites them. They've won games by just straight up knocking quarterbacks out of the game earlier this year. They've won games by running on a field goal unit to kick a field goal as time is expiring with no timeouts, where the kicker doesn't even have time to set up properly. Yeah. So all sorts of things have gone their way. Winning touchdown drives, stops late in the fourth quarter, all sorts of things. If this is a close game, TCU is really going to have to be careful here. I think if you're TCU, you really need to just take it to them early and kind of get almost a blowout win. I would not trust the universe to give you more luck late in this game. And I don't want to say it like they're lucky to be winning all these games. They're a good team. Look, they could win the whole thing if they get into the playoffs. Right. But you do want to take a little bit of this luck equation out of it and handle business. But yeah, I agree with you. TCU needs to watch out here because Kansas State might shake up this playoff.
Right. And I think we're going to get into the last game, the last SEC championship between Georgia and LSU. Georgia's the -17.5 favorite. I think that's in due of Jaden Daniels. What do you know what the status is with Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, we're not sure.
It's kind of like day to day, right?
Yeah, it's very day to day. And just in all of college, it's kind of tough because they really screw you over. You don't know who's playing, who's not. Yeah. You think somebody's healthy. You just saw him play last week. Then game day, you see them. Sometimes they don't even travel with the team, and then you find out the morning of. Yeah. It's a mess with college football. But yeah, Jaden Daniels is very questionable in terms of if he's going to play or not. My guess is he does play. I don't see how if he's even kind of able to play. He doesn't. I mean, we saw, for instance, Blake Corum come out with Michigan, and we kind of figured he wasn't going to be able to play or be effective. He was at least in for 2 plays. He tried to give it a go before they shut him down. My guess is Jaden Daniels will be able to play, and even if he's not 100%. But yeah, I mean, big point spread. Georgia's kind of lost a lot of steam over the past few weeks, right? They're not destroying teams like they once were. And Georgia's very content in some of these games to, once they're ahead, just kind of, run the clock out and get to the next game. So I would say point spread wise, LSU plus 17.5 might be a pretty nice spread to take. But ultimately, I think Georgia wins this game, whether they cover the spread or not. And I don't see much being able to go LSU's way in this. I mean, can LSU win this game? They certainly can. We saw what they were able to do to Bama. But they're just a much more inconsistent team. Obviously, losing last week to A&M and things like that. And they just don't have the talent all around, I don't think, to go against a team like Georgia that's, they don't have the greatest offense, but they can put some things together. But very solid defense, as we know. And yeah, I think that's going to be too much for an LSU team.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna get into the last segment with our best bets for the week. So the first game we have is the Fresno State versus Boise State. So what's kind of your thoughts on the bets for the week?
Yeah, Fresno State has it's been an up and down team this year, but it's because they lost their starting quarterback, Jake Hanier. So look, they got him back a few weeks ago, and they've been really taking it to the team since he's been back. Their offense has been nice, airing it out all over the place. They destroyed Wyoming like 30-0 last week. The last few weeks before that, they've handled their business. So I expect Fresno State to keep this rolling. Boise State is no pushover, but I think, Fresno State had this potential all year. Like I said, without their starting quarterback, who's a solid quarterback, he should have a chance to, at the very least, if he's not drafted, he'll be in some NFL training camps. But yeah, he's a solid guy. Their offense is solid. Defensively, they do enough there. I think they're going to be able to win outright against Boise State. So I'll take the +3 here. I like the upside of Fresno State against Boise State, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I think their offense is going to be too much, and they're going to be able to find a way to win this game. Next best bet, we have Toledo going to Ohio. This championship game, Ohio's been playing pretty well as of late, but Toledo is a dangerous team. They even played Ohio State earlier this year, and were able to put up a decent amount of points with them. They have some solid running backs, players who've transferred out of some bigger programs. They have a quarterback who's dynamic. He could, use his feet to not just run the ball, but also extend plays, and then pretty effective throwing the ball on the run and getting the ball where it needs to go. If he's feeling pressure or using his feet to kind of move around. So I do like Toledo to cover the spread here. It has been switching to the opposite direction. So I know when this thing opened, Toledo was -2.5. I think Ohio was +2.5. I think Ohio it's back to -1 +1 now. So, the odds are shrinking, but yeah, I like Toledo still. I think they have a chance to win outright. I would not be surprised if Ohio wins this game, but a week like this, there's not a lot of games, so this is one of my better bets for the week. And then we can close out our best bet section with our last game, a game that we talked about earlier. I'm gonna ride with this Utah team over USC. I think that's not going to be a very popular pick, but I do believe in Utah. USC is hot, like we said. But I think Utah, by what they did last year, putting together a nice body of work, a nice season, beating Oregon twice, I think they're going to be able to go into this game, play up to USC's level. I think they're pretty underrated, as we talked about earlier this year. And I think, I like Utah to cause some chaos and beat USC and, kind of change some things in that top 4 over here.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Utah is gonna. I think they'll be the one to kind of just cause all the chaos and all the problems in the playoff picture for obviously USC, and then just be able, and then that'll just open up so much conversation for the committee. So, but with that being said, we're gonna wrap this episode up. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. We always want to hear from you guys, and we'll be back with you next week. Hopefully, talking a lot more about just the whole playoff atmosphere and everything that we're gonna get into. So, thanks for watching.